There's a new senior deduction available. It starts in 2025, so current year, running through 2028, and then it goes away. It is $6,000 per person who is 65 or older. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about the definition of 65 or older. There's a quirk to it. It's been described in the media and in the early days as something that is meant to make Social Security tax-free. It doesn't really touch Social Security. It's just another deduction for people over 65, many of whom happen to be on Social Security, but there's no linkage to Social Security in the calculations themselves. I'll show you that. Our interpretation is that this is a below-the-line deduction. I have seen a couple articles that called it a above-the-line deduction, so we'll just have to watch that, but everything we've seen indicates to us that it's a below-the-line deduction. In other words, it does not impact the AGI of the taxpayer. All right, let's take a look at an example here. These two clients, it's a married filing joint return. They are both over age 65, and I gave them $30,000 of IRA distributions. I gave them $55,000 of Social Security. Notice a good portion of their Social Security is not taxable just yet. As we add income, it will become more taxable. I gave them, they're going to take the standard deduction. This is in 2025. And here you'll see it, the enhanced senior deduction. They get $6,000 per person. Again, we're displaying it as a below-the-line deduction, along with QBI and along with some of the other new deductions, which we all interpreted to be below-the-line deductions. This does have a phase-out. The phase-out for joint filers starts at $150,000 of MAGI. That's AGI plus you add back like foreign earned income exclusion stuff. Starts at $150,000 and then it's totally phased out after $100,000. So if you have $250,000 AGI, no deduction for you. Single filers, it starts at $75,000 and it again phases out over the next $100,000 of income. So it's totally gone at $175,000 MAGI. And there's a marriage penalty, like a mini marriage penalty in there, because both single and joint both phase out over $100,000. Let me show you how this looks in range calc. I'm expecting to see a couple things on range calc. One, remember our Social Security was not fully taxed. And so as we add income, more of that Social Security becomes taxable. That's what range calc does. By the way, range calc is a feature in the software where I can take a scenario, and then what range calc does is it takes that scenario as a baseline and then it starts adding income, $1,000 at a time, and then it reruns the entire tax calculation. And what was happening here, that's what's happening in purple here. This taxpayer is in the 10% bracket. However, because more and more Social Security is coming online as being taxable, which in turn is taxed at 10%, the actual effective rate for that next $1,000 of income is 18.5% here. All right, so that's all old stuff. We've all had that. So what's in green here is the phase out of this enhanced senior deduction. So it starts phasing out as I add income, and then it fully phases out after $100,000 of income subsequent to that. One of the things that's kind of interesting here is as I add income, as my Social Security becomes more taxable, that increases my MAGI even faster than the $1,000 at a time I was increasing. And so this phase out is actually happening a bit earlier. So anyway, that's the way the phase outs work. You're going to see this for your older clients who are over 65 and older, because the phase out happens relatively early. Like sometimes like the SALT deduction phase out is happening at $500,000 of AGI. This is starting at $150,000. So you're going to see it happening for many more of your clients. So it's going to be really critical to run things like range calc when you're considering things like Roth conversions and things like that, where you're bringing income into or out of a year. Okay, I promised something about the quirkiness of this particular part of the bill. It says over 65, and if I'm going to bring it up on screen here, I'm going to bring up the language of what the bill says. It defines over 65 as the taxpayer, if the taxpayer has attained age 65 before the close of the taxable year. And honestly, that's how I would define age 65. That's, if you turn 65 during the year, you're 65. But recall that we have we have a different over 65 deduction that we've always had that you can tack onto this standard deduction. And if you look at Form 1040, I'll bring it up on screen here. If you look at Form 1040, people who were born on January 1st, they actually get to count as age 65 a year earlier. So they get to treat themselves as being 65 or older in the year when they're 64. And so there's like a mismatch within our tax law where we have two over 65 deductions, one of which has one definition for what does it mean to be over 65, and the other has another definition of what it means to be over 65. And so it'll be interesting to see how the IRS treats that. We ended up coding it the way it's written in the law. So like someone who is born on January 1st, you will see that different treatment for the two deductions within our software. If it turns out that the IRS ends up implementing it in a different way, we can fix that. But at present in the software, you're going to see for someone born Jan 1, slightly different behavior for the year in which they turn 65.